My own son stole my entire retirement, $127,000, and I only found out when my electricity got cut off. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it's traveled. My name is Joel. I'm 72 years old, and 3 months ago I discovered the most devastating betrayal a father could imagine. But before I tell you how I got my revenge, and trust me, justice was served, let me take you back to that horrible Tuesday morning when my world collapsed. I was making coffee, the way I had every morning for the past 5 years since Maria passed away. The house felt too quiet without her laughter, but at least I had my routine. At least I had my dignity. At least I thought I had my retirement secure. Then the lights went out. Not just a flicker, complete darkness. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, thinking it was just another neighborhood blackout. But when I called the electric company, the automated voice delivered words that made my blood freeze. Your account is 90 days past due. Amount owed, $847.32. Past due? Impossible. I had automatic payments set up. I had never missed a bill in my entire life. That's when I heard my son Ricardo's key in the front door. Dad, you okay? I saw the power truck outside. My 45-year-old son, the one I'd raised alone after his mother died when he was 12. The one I'd put through college, paid for his wedding, helped with his down payment. The one who insisted on helping me manage my finances after I had that small heart attack last year. Ricardo, there's been some mistake with the electric bill. I said, show him my phone. Can you help me figure this out? His face went pale. Actually pale. And in that moment, in the darkness of my own kitchen, I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. Dad, let me call them. Sometimes there are system errors. But his hands were shaking. My successful, confident son, the regional sales manager who always bragged about his poker games and his investment strategies, was shaking like a leaf. Ricardo, I said quietly, show me my bank statement. Dad, you don't need to worry about. Show me my bank statement. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Santos from next door asking the power company worker what was going on. Soon the whole neighborhood would know that Joel Martinez couldn't pay his electric bill. When Ricardo finally pulled up my account on his phone, my account that he convinced me to give him access to just in case of emergencies, I saw numbers that made no sense. Checking account, $23.47. Savings account, $156.23. Retirement account, $0. Where's my money, Ricardo? He started crying. My grown son, cry like the little boy he used to be when he'd broken something valuable. But this wasn't a lamp or a window. This was my entire future. Dad, I can explain. I had some bad luck, and I thought I could win it back before you noticed. You thought. The words exploded out of me. You thought you could steal your dead mother's life insurance? You thought you could steal the money I saved working double shift for 30 years. The power company worker knocked on the door. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Santos and Mr. Rodriguez and half the street watching my humiliation unfold. But here's what Ricardo didn't know. Here's what this gambling-addicted thief, who called himself my son, had forgotten. I had survived 40 years in construction management by being stupid. I didn't build a successful life by letting people walk over me. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let my retirement years be destroyed by his addiction. That was the moment I stopped being a victim. That was the moment I decided to show my son, and anyone else who might be watching, what happens when you mess with Joel Martinez. The revenge I'm about to tell you about, it was swift, it was complete, and it was absolutely devastating. Let me take you back 6 months before that horrible Tuesday, back when I still believed my son was the responsible man I'd raised him to be. After Maria died 5 years ago, Ricardo became my anchor. He'd call every day, visit twice a week, always asking if I needed anything. Dad, you shouldn't be handling all these bills and investment alone, he'd say. What if you have another heart episode? What if something happens? The heart attack had been mild, what doctors call a warning shot. But Ricardo acted like I was on death's door. He brought me articles about seniors being scammed, stories about elderly people forgetting to pay bills, statistics about financial mistakes in older adults. "Just let me help," he'd plead. "I work in sales. I understand money. You taught me everything about being responsible." Looking back, I can see how carefully he played me, how he used my love for him, my pride in raising him right, my fear becoming a burden. He was like a spider spinning his web, and I walked right into it. The first red flag should have been his sudden interest in my finances. For 40 years, Ricardo had never asked about money unless he needed it. Even as an adult, he'd been careless with cash, always buying the latest gadgets, always taking expensive vacations with his wife Carmen. But after my heart attack, suddenly he was Mr. Responsible. "Dad, know what? Let me set up automatic payments for your utilities. That way you never have to worry. Dad, your retirement account should be in higher yield investments. Let me research the best options. Dad, what if you gave me power of attorney? Just temporarily, just so I can help manage things while you recover." Each suggestion made perfect sense. Each one demonstrated his love and concern. Each one gave him more access to my life's work. I should have noticed when he started visiting more often. I should have questioned why he always seemed stressed, why Carmen stopped coming with him, why he kept checking his phone during our conversations. The signs were all there. Like the afternoon, I caught him on my computer when I came back from the grocery store early. He jumped up so fast he knocked over his coffee. "Just checking my email. Dad, my phone's battery died." Or the time I found betting slips in his jacket pocket when I was hanging it up. When I asked about them, he laughed. "Oh, those? Yeah. Some guys at work had a Super Bowl pool. I won $50. Or how he always volunteered to get the mail, always offered to organize my financial papers, always had explanations for why certain statements hadn't arrived. The Postal Service is so unreliable. Dad, good thing we went digital with most of your accounts." Digital, where I couldn't see anything unless I asked. I remember the night he convinced me to consolidate my accounts. We were sitting in my living room, the same room where Maria and I had planned our retirement dreams. He had spreadsheets printed out, graphs showing projected growth, official-looking documents. "See, Dad, if we move everything to this high-yield account, you'll earn an extra $8,000 a year. That's more than enough to cover any unexpected expenses. The account required online access only. It's more secure that way," he explained. "Less chance of identity theft." I signed everything. I trusted him completely. 3 months later, my son had access to $127,000 in retirement funds, $34,000 in savings, and my monthly pension deposits. He controlled my financial life entirely, and I felt grateful for his help. But predators always get greedy, always push too far. And the day Ricardo started missing my electric bill because he gambled away the utility money too, that was the day he sealed his own fate. Because while I'd been trusting him with my money, I'd also been learning things, watching patterns, noticing details. And the details I'd noticed were about to destroy his entire world. After that devastating morning with the power company, I knew I had exactly one advantage. Ricardo thought I was just a confused old man who didn't understand modern finances. He had no idea that 40 years of managing construction projects had taught me to be methodical, thorough, and absolutely relentless when tracking down problems. The first thing I did was get my power back on. I had $180 in cash hidden in Maria's jewelry box. Money I kept for emergencies that thankfully Ricardo didn't know about. I paid the minimum to restore service. Then I got to work. I called the bank pretending to be confused about online access. My son set everything up for me, but I can't remember how to check my statements, I told the customer service representative. Within an hour, I had temporary access to view my accounts. What I found made my hands shake. The transfers weren't random. They followed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork. Sometimes $2,000, sometimes $5,000. Once a devastating $15,000 transfer. On the same day, he called to tell me about his big presentation at work. But here's what really broke my heart. The timing. The first major withdrawal, $8,500, happened on April 15th, the anniversary of Maria's death. While I was at the cemetery putting flowers on his mother's grave, he was stealing from her life insurance. I printed everything. Bank statements, transfer records, account histories. Then I drove to Ricardo's workplace. Mr. Martinez. His secretary seemed surprised to see me. Ricardo's not here today. Actually, he's been out a lot lately. Is everything okay? Not here. On a Wednesday afternoon, when he was supposed to be at his big client meeting, I sat in my car outside his house for 3 hours that day. Carmen's car wasn't there. She was at work. But Ricardo's BMW was parked in the driveway, and every 30 minutes, I saw him pace past the living room window. Phone pressed his ear. Through my binoculars, yes, I keep bird-watching equipment. I could see his gestures. Frantic, desperate, the body language of a man in serious trouble. That evening, he called me. Dad, how are you feeling? Sorry I couldn't visit today. Crazy busy at work. Lying came so naturally to him now. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I followed him. I documented his schedule. I learned things about my son that shattered my heart into pieces. Tuesday mornings, the Indian casino 40 minutes away. He arrived at 9 a.m. when they opened, stay until 3 p.m. Friday evenings, an underground poker game in a warehouse district. I watched him go in with confidence and come out looking destroyed. Saturday afternoons, online betting in his car outside the public library, using their Wi-Fi. He wasn't just gambling. He was gambling compulsively, desperately, with a systematic dedication of an addiction that had completely consumed his life. I started keeping a journal. Times, dates, amounts, locations. I photographed his car at the casino. I recorded phone conversations where he lied about his whereabouts. I saved every text message where he made excuses. The most heartbreaking discovery came when I found his login information saved on his computer. I knew his password because it was Maria 1978, his mother's name and birth year. The password he'd used for everything since he was a teenager. His online betting account showed losses that made my stolen retirement look small. He owed money to sites I'd never heard of. He had credit cards maxed out at amounts that would take him decades to pay off. He was borrowing money from loan sharks at interest rates that could only lead to violence. My son wasn't just a thief. He was a desperate, terrified man who had gambled himself into a hole so deep that stealing from his own father seemed like his only option. But here's what Ricardo didn't understand about the man who raised him. I'd been poor before. I'd been scared before. I'd faced impossible situations before. What I'd never been was a man who let his family destroy themselves without a fight. And you, what would you do in this person's place? I would love to hear your opinion. So please share it with me in the comments. The plan I was forming wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about tough love. It was about saving my son from himself, even if he hated me for it. But first, he was going to learn that there are consequences when you steal from Joao Martinez. 3 weeks after I'd started my investigation, I had enough evidence to destroy my son's life 10 times over. But I needed one final piece of the puzzle, the complete scope of his betrayal. That's when I hired Miguel Santos, a private investigator who'd done work for my construction company years ago when we had theft problems on job sites. Miguel was discreet, thorough, and completely loyal to people who treated him fairly. Joao, this isn't going to be easy to hear, Miguel warned me when he called his findings. Your son's situation is worse than you imagine. We met at a coffee shop across town, away from anywhere Ricardo might see us. Miguel slid a thick folder across the table, and what I read inside broke something fundamental inside my chest. The gambling debts totaled $340,000. Not just my retirement money. Ricardo had borrowed against his house, maxed out every credit card, taken cash advances, even stolen from his own employer's petty cash account. But that wasn't the worst part. Joao, Miguel said gently, your son has been forging your signature on loan applications. He's taken out $45,000 in credit in your name. Your credit score has been destroyed. My own name, my reputation. My credit that I'd spent 72 years building, destroyed by my own child. Miguel showed me copies of applications Ricardo had submitted online, using my social security number, my address, my information. He'd been gambling with borrowed money, using my identity as collateral. There's more, Miguel continued. He's been telling people you have dementia. His wife, his co-workers, even some of your neighbors. He's been building a story that you're mentally incompetent, so that when people question his control over your finances, they think he's being responsible. The coffee cup in my hand started shaking. Not from age, from pure rage. Carmen knew. His wife knew he was stealing from me, and she'd been helping him cover it up. When I thought she was being respectful by giving me space after Maria died, she was actually avoiding me because she couldn't look me in the eye. How long has this been going on? I asked. The gambling started about 2 years ago. Small amounts at first. But the systematic theft from your accounts? That began exactly 6 days after your heart attack. 6 days. My son had waited 6 days after I nearly died to start stealing my life savings. Miguel pulled out his phone and showed me a recording. I was able to capture this conversation outside the casino last Tuesday. It was Ricardo's voice, talking to someone I didn't recognize. The old man doesn't suspect anything. I've got maybe 2 more months before he starts asking serious questions. By then I'll have hit the big score and put everything back. He'll never know. And if you don't hit the big score, the other voice asked, then I'll have him declared incompetent and take full power of attorney. Either way, I'm covered. I sat in that coffee shop, listening to my son plot to have me declared mentally incompetent, and I realized I wasn't dealing with just addiction anymore. I was dealing with calculated, premeditated elder abuse. This wasn't a desperate man making bad choices. This was a predator who had chosen his own father as prey. Miguel's final revelation was the most devastating. Ricardo has been researching nursing homes, Joao. Expensive ones that would require selling your house. I have evidence he's been in contact with real estate agents about getting the property appraised. My house. The house where Maria and I had planned to grow old together. Where I'd raised my son. Where all my memories lived. He was planning to steal that too. That night, I sat in my living room looking at 47 years of family photos on the mantel. Pictures of Ricardo as a baby, as a child, graduating high school, getting married. Pictures of 3 of us, Maria, Ricardo, and me, during happier times. I cried for the son I thought I had. I cried for the trust that was broken forever. I cried for Maria, who would be heartbroken to see what her baby boy had become. But when I was done crying, I felt something else. Absolute, crystal clear determination. Ricardo had made a fundamental mistake. He'd assumed that because I was older, I was weaker. He confused kindness with weakness, trust with stupidity. He was about to learn the difference between Joao Martinez, the loving father, and Joao Martinez, the man who'd survived 72 years by never letting anyone destroy what he'd built. The plan I'd been forming was about to become his worst nightmare. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because sometimes the only way to save someone from themselves is to make the consequences of their actions so severe that they have no choice but to change. My son had stolen my retirement, destroyed my credit, and plotted to steal my home and my dignity. Now, he was going to discover what happens when you wage war against someone who actually knows how to fight. The beauty of being underestimated is that people never see you coming. Ricardo thought he was dealing with a confused old man. He had no idea he was about to face a construction project manager who'd spent 4 decades solving complex problems under pressure. My plan had 3 phases: documentation, intervention, and consequences. Each phase would use Ricardo's own actions against him, and each would be perfectly legal, completely justified, and absolutely devastating. Phase 1 had already begun. Thanks to Miguel's investigation, I now had evidence that could send Ricardo to prison for elder abuse, identity theft, and embezzlement. But prison wouldn't cure his addiction. It would just make him a more desperate criminal when he got out. I spent 2 weeks consulting with professionals. First, my lawyer, Jennifer Kim, who'd handle Maria's estate. When I showed her the evidence, her face went white. Joao, this is federal-level identity theft. The credit applications alone could get him 10 years in prison. Are you sure you want to handle this privately? I want to save my son, not destroy him, I told her. But he needs to face consequences serious enough to shock him into getting help. Next, I met with Dr. Patricia Valdez, an addiction specialist who'd been recommended by my cardiologist. She explained something crucial. Enabling an addict by protecting them from consequences actually makes their addiction stronger. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them face the full weight of their choices. The plan I developed was surgical in its precision. I would let Ricardo think he was winning right up until the moment I destroyed every lie he'd built. I would use his own addiction against him, his own overconfidence, his own assumptions about my limitations. First, I changed all my passwords and security questions, using information only I knew. Then I opened new bank accounts at a different institution, transferring what little money I had left out of Ricardo's reach. I installed security cameras around my house, hidden ones that he'd never notice. I started recording all our phone conversations using an app Miguel had recommended. Every interaction we had from now on would be documented. But the masterstroke was how I handled his gambling addiction. Miguel had discovered that Ricardo's biggest weakness was his belief that he was due for a big win. He developed superstitions around his betting, certain days, certain amounts, certain games where he would convince his luck would change. So I started feeding his addiction the exact information it craved. When he visited, I casually mentioned overheard conversations about stock market tips, sports betting insights, poker strategies. I'd leave financial magazines open articles about guaranteed investment opportunities. I made sure he knew about my emergency cash reserves, money that didn't actually exist. Ricardo took the bait completely. His visits became more frequent. His questions about my finances became more probing. He started hinting about investment opportunities that could help us both make money. Meanwhile, I was building an airtight case. I documented every lie, every theft, every manipulation. I recorded conversations where he contradicted previous stories. I photographed evidence of his gambling. Most importantly, I started reaching out to addiction treatment facilities, not for consultations, for admissions. I researched the best programs, the ones with highest success rates, the ones that specialize in gambling addiction combined with family intervention. The facility I chose, Pine Ridge Recovery Center, had a unique program. They would accept patients who were admitted involuntarily if there was evidence of financial crimes connected to the addiction, and if immediate family members could prove the person was a danger to themselves and others. Dr. Valdez helped me understand the legal requirements. In our state, if someone commits financial crimes against family members due to addiction, and if they're deemed a threat to continue harmful behavior, they can be committed for a 90-day evaluation and treatment program. I gathered testimonies from neighbors who'd seen Ricardo's erratic behavior. I documented his lies to employers. I proved he'd been living a double life that was unsustainable and dangerous. But I needed one final element. I needed Ricardo to commit one more theft, one so blatant and desperate that would provide the final legal justification for intervention. So I set the perfect trap. I let him overhear a phone conversation about a CD that was about to mature, $25,000 that would be liquid and available the following week. Money that would solve all his problems. Money that didn't exist. But Ricardo's addiction wouldn't let him think clearly enough to verify that. His desperation would drive him to make one final, devastating mistake that would give me everything I needed to save his life, whether he wanted me to or not. The appointment with Pine Ridge was already scheduled. The legal paperwork was already prepared. The intervention team was already briefed. My son thought he was days away from solving all his problems. Instead, he was about to face the consequences that would either cure him or destroy him completely. And for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. The trap was set for Friday morning. I'd made sure Ricardo overheard my fake phone conversation about the $25,000 CD becoming available, and I'd seen the immediate change in his demeanor, that desperate hunger in his eyes that meant he was already planning how to steal it. I spent Thursday night setting up the final pieces. The cameras were positioned perfectly. The recording equipment was tested. Miguel was parked across the street with backup documentation. Jennifer Kim was on standby with legal papers. The intervention team from Pine Ridge Recovery was waiting for my call. Friday morning, I went through my normal routine: coffee, morning news, watering the plants Maria had loved. When Ricardo arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, I was ready. "Morning, Dad. You seem in a good mood today." Well, that CD we talked about, it finally matured. $25,000, liquid and ready to go. I'm thinking about what to do with it. I watched his face carefully. The mask of concern he'd worn for months couldn't hide the calculation in his eyes. He was already figuring out how to access that money. "That's great, Dad. I've been thinking maybe we should move that into a higher yield account. I found this investment opportunity that could double that money in 6 months." There it was. The same script he'd used to steal my retirement, now being deployed against fictitious money. "Oh, that sounds wonderful, son. But you know how I am with technology. Could you help me transfer it online? I trust you to handle these things." "Of course, Dad. Let me set that up for you." For the next hour, I watched my son systematically attempt to steal money that didn't exist, all while being recorded by 3 different cameras and 2 audio devices. He accessed accounts, attempted transfers, created false documentation to justify the investment. Every keystroke, every forged signature, every lie was captured in perfect digital quality. When he finally said, "Okay, Dad, it's all taken care of. Your money is safely invested and will start earning immediately," I knew I had him completely. "That's wonderful, Ricardo. I'm so grateful to have a son I can trust." The word trust made him flinch slightly, but he was too focused on his imagined victory to pay attention to the warning signs. After he left, I made the calls. First to Jennifer Kim. "It's done. I have everything we need." Then to Pine Ridge Recovery. "We're ready to proceed with the intervention." Finally to Miguel. "Phase 3 begins now." The intervention team arrived at Ricardo's house at 2 p.m., just as he was getting ready to leave for what I knew would be another gambling session with his new investment money. Carmen was at work, so he was alone when the doorbell rang. Through Miguel's surveillance, I watched the entire confrontation. Ricardo opened the door expecting a delivery and instead found Dr. Valdez, 2 recovery specialists, a legal advocate, and Miguel with a folder full of evidence. "Ricardo Martinez, we're here regarding your gambling addiction and the financial crimes you committed against your father." I wasn't there personally. That was strategic. Ricardo needed to face this without being able to manipulate me through guilt or emotion. Dr. Valdez later told me exactly what happened. Ricardo denied everything at first. Then he tried to claim I had dementia and was making false accusations. Then he attempted to run, literally tried to push past the intervention team and flee his own house. That's when Miguel opened the folder. Bank records showing systematic theft. Photos of him at casinos during work hours. Recordings of him lying to his employer. Evidence of identity theft using my personal information. Video footage of this morning's attempted theft of the fictitious $25,000. "You have 2 choices," Dr. Valdez explained calmly. "You can come with us voluntarily for a 90-day addiction treatment program, or we can involve law enforcement, and you can face federal charges for elder abuse and identity theft." Ricardo chose treatment. Within 6 hours, my son was checked into Pine Ridge Recovery Center for intensive gambling addiction therapy. His access to all financial accounts was legally suspended. His wife was informed of the full scope of his crimes. His employer was notified that he'd been stealing from petty cash. But here's the most important part. His debts became legally frozen during his treatment period. The loan sharks, the credit card companies, the online betting sites, all of them had to wait while he got the help he needed. I spent that evening in my living room, looking at those family photos again. But this time, instead of crying, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My son was getting help. My money was protected. My dignity was restored. And tomorrow, I would begin the process of rebuilding both our lives. The phone started ringing at 6 a.m. the next morning. Carmen, calling from Ricardo's house, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. "How could you do this to your own son? He's sick, Joao. He needs family support, not punishment. Carmen, I said calmly, your husband stole $127,000 from me. He destroyed my credit. He was planning to have me declared incompetent and sell my house. What exactly did you think was going to happen? But treatment? Locking him up? This will ruin his career. His addiction already ruined his career. I'm trying to save what's left of his life. She hung up on me, but called back an hour later. Then again that afternoon. By the end of the first week, Carmen had left 17 voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. What she didn't know was that Pine Ridge had prepared me for exactly this response. Dr. Valdez had explained that families of addicts often blame everyone except the addict when consequences finally arrive. Carmen has been enabling Ricardo's addiction by covering for him. Dr. Valdez told me during our family counseling session, she's angry at you because your actions make it impossible for her to keep pretending everything is normal. The neighbors had mixed reactions. Mrs. Santos brought me casserole and told me she suspected something was wrong. Ricardo looked so stressed lately, and he was coming and going at odd hours. I'm proud of you for getting him help. But other neighbors whispered about family loyalty and wondered if I'd been too harsh. Some people, I learned, would always blame the victim for fighting back. Ricardo's employer called me directly. Mr. Martinez, we need to discuss the missing petty cash. We were prepared to press charges, but if Ricardo is getting treatment, he'll pay back every penny, I assured them. But he needs to complete his recovery program first. The hardest part was the mail that kept arriving. Bills for debts I didn't even know about. Collection notices for credit cards open in my name. Threats from loan companies I'd never heard of. Jennifer Kim helped me navigate the legal maze of identity theft recovery. The good news, she said, is that everything Ricardo did was so well documented that proving fraud will be straightforward. The bad news is that it's going to take months to clean up the damage. 3 weeks into Ricardo's treatment, I was allowed my first supervised visit. The man who walked into the family meeting room looked like my son, but everything else had changed. He'd lost weight. His hands didn't shake anymore. His eyes were clear for the first time in months. "Dad," he said, and started crying immediately. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Dr. Valdez sat between us, managing the conversation carefully. This wasn't about forgiveness yet. It was about accountability. "Tell your father what you've learned about your addiction," she prompted. I lost control 2 years ago. At first it was just fun, just small bets with friends. But then I started chasing losses, and the amounts got bigger, and I started borrowing money and... He looked directly at me for the first time. "Dad, I convinced myself I was going to win it back. Every time I took money from your accounts, I told myself it was just temporary. I told myself I'd hit the big score and put everything back before you noticed. But you knew you were stealing from me." "Yes." His voice was barely a whisper. "I knew, and I hated myself every time I did it. But the addiction was stronger than everything. Stronger than my love for you. Stronger than my respect for Mom's memory. Stronger than my own conscience." Dr. Valdez explained what I'd already suspected. Gambling addiction affects the same brain chemistry as drug addiction. Ricardo wasn't choosing to hurt you consciously. His brain had been hijacked by a disease that made stealing seem like a survival mechanism. "But he made the choice to start gambling," I said. "Yes," Ricardo said. "That choice was mine. And every choice after that was mine too. The addiction doesn't excuse what I did, Dad. It just explains it." We talked for 2 hours. About the lies, the manipulation, the systematic betrayal. About how his addiction had turned him into someone neither of us recognized. But we also talked about recovery, about the work he was doing to understand his triggers, about the 12-step program he'd committed to, about the financial recovery plan that would take him years to complete, but would eventually restore what he'd stolen. "I know you might never forgive me," he said as the visit ended, "but I want you to know that getting caught was the best thing that could have happened to me. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have lost everything, including my life." Driving home from Pine Ridge, I realized something important. I'd already forgiven him. Not because what he did was acceptable, but because fighting addiction while protecting yourself from addicts are two completely different things. I could love my son and still refuse to enable his disease. I could support his recovery while holding him accountable for his crimes. That night, Carmen called again. But this time, her voice was different. "Joao," she said quietly, "I visited Ricardo today. He told me everything. About the gambling. About the lies he made me part of. About what he was planning to do with your house." She paused for a long moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving him when I didn't know how." 6 months later, I'm sitting in my living room. The same living room where this whole nightmare began, but everything has changed. The lights are on. The bills are paid. My bank accounts are secure and growing again. More importantly, my son is coming home tomorrow. Ricardo completed his 90-day intensive program at Pine Ridge, then voluntarily extended his stay for another 60 days. He's been clean from gambling for nearly 7 months now, attending daily meetings, working with sponsor, rebuilding his life one day at a time. The financial recovery has been slow but steady. Ricardo signed over his life insurance policy to guarantee repayment of what he stole. He sold his BMW and bought a used Honda. He and Carmen downsized from their suburban house to a modest apartment, using the equity to pay down his debts. Every month, exactly $800 gets deposited into my account from Ricardo's paychecks. At this rate, it'll take him 12 years to pay back everything he stole. But he insisted on this arrangement, and Dr. Valdez supported it as part of his accountability process. Making amends isn't just about saying sorry, she explained. It's about taking concrete actions to repair the damage, even when it's difficult. My credit has been mostly restored. Jennifer Kim helped me navigate the identity theft claims, and most of the fraudulent accounts have been removed from my record. I'm not back to where I was financially, but I'm stable, secure, and independent. More importantly, I learned something about myself that I'd forgotten during all those months of feeling like a victim. I'm stronger than I thought I was. The neighborhood treats me differently now. Word got around about what happened, but instead of pity, I see respect. Mrs. Sandos told me, "Joao, you showed everyone that being older doesn't mean being helpless. You fought for yourself when it mattered most." Carmen and I have rebuilt our relationship too. She's been attending Al-Anon meetings for families of addicts, learning how her attempts to protect Ricardo actually enabled his disease. She apologized to me with tears in her eyes. I was so afraid of him hitting rock bottom that I helped him dig the hole deeper. But the biggest change is in Ricardo himself. The man coming home tomorrow isn't the desperate, lying addict who stole my retirement. He's also not exactly the son I raised before his addiction began. He's something new, someone who's faced his worst self and chosen to become better. Last week, during our regular phone call, he said something that made me proud for the first time in years. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mom a lot, about how disappointed she would have been in what I became. But I think she'd be proud of what you did. You didn't just save my life, you saved my soul. The money I have left is enough. Not abundant, but enough. I've learned to live more simply, and honestly, I prefer it. The expensive dinners and unnecessary luxuries that Ricardo used to push on me were never really what I wanted anyway. I've started volunteering at Pine Ridge, sharing my story with other families dealing with addiction. There's something powerful about telling people, yes, you can love someone and still refuse to let them destroy you. Yes, you can save someone by holding them accountable instead of protecting them from consequences. Dr. Valdez asked me to speak at a conference about elder abuse and addiction. Standing at that podium, looking out at an audience of social workers, therapists, and law enforcement officers, I realized something profound. My story had become bigger than just my family. The hardest thing, I told them, wasn't discovering my son's addiction. It wasn't even losing my life savings. The hardest thing was accepting that the loving, protective thing to do was to stop being loving and protecting the way I'd always done it. Tomorrow, Ricardo moves into a halfway house 6 blocks from my home. He'll continue his recovery program, keep paying restitution, and slowly rebuild his relationship with Carmen. It'll take years, maybe decades, before everything is fully healed. But we have years. We have time. And we have something we lost during his addiction. We have honesty. The other day, I was looking through those family photos again, the ones I cried over during the darkest days of this nightmare. But now I see them differently. They're not just memories of who we used to be. They're proof that love can survive betrayal, that families can recover from devastation, that people can change if the consequences are severe enough to shock them into healing. If you like my story, you can support me by making a donation so I can write more stories. Thank you in advance. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. Tonight, I'm making Ricardo's favorite dinner, the same meal Maria used to cook for his birthday. Not because everything is perfect, not because we're back to where we started, but because we're somewhere new, somewhere better, somewhere honest. My name is Joao Martinez. I'm 72 years old. 6 months ago, my own son stole my retirement and nearly destroyed my life. Today, I'm proud to say that both of us are stronger than we've ever been. And sometimes, that's what real love looks like. Not protecting someone from their consequences, but making sure those consequences are severe enough to save their life. The lights are on in my house. The bills are paid. My son is coming home tomorrow. And I know with absolute certainty that Maria will be proud of both of us. The end. Just as Papa, blue and white. When tough love saves lives.